Very good afternoon to one and all present. On behalf of Amity Institute of International Studies, I, Muskan Tyagi, welcome all of you to the third day of Vijikishu 2021. So today we'll continue with the plenary session 4th of the e-conference on the theme Asia Pacific in Prospective Context. I extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished chair for the session, Professor K. Jayaprasad, who is currently designated as Pro Vice Chancellor at the Central University of Kerala. He is also a professor at the Department of International Relations and a member of the Executive Council in Central University of Kerala. He is the Dean at the School of Cultural Studies and Director at Mahatma Ayankali Center for Kerala Studies. Welcome, sir. I now would like to welcome our presenters for this session. First, we have Dr. Amit Kumar Mishra, an Associate Professor at the School of Global Affairs, Ambedkar University. He also worked as an Assistant Professor at the University of Hyderabad. And Mr. Mishra also is a member of the editorial board Omnis, where he contributed to edit the Journal of Migration and Society, Seoul, South Korea. And he's currently working on his forthcoming book titled Survivors of the Servitude, Indian Labor Diaspora in Mauritius, 1834 to 1940s. Very warm welcome, sir. Then we have Mr. M.R. Ranganathan Mulwadi, sir, chairman of the ABK Aots Tosokai, which is the oldest Japanese language school in South India, having a history of more than 40 years. He also worked with the Madras Port Trust Government of Iraq, Piling and Foundation Company, Square D Software Limited, as an engineer and senior manager. Very warm welcome, sir. The third presenter we have today with us is Dr. Sita Kanta Mishra, an Associate Professor of International Relations at the Pandit Deen Dayal Energy University, School of Liberal Studies in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. Dr. Mishra received his PhD from the Jawaharlal Nehru University Center for South Asian Studies in New Delhi. Welcome to you too, sir. The fourth presenter we have with us is Dr. Ernest Gunasekara Rockwell, who serves as the editor-in-chief of the journal IndoPacific Affairs and the director of the consortium of Indo-Pacific researchers, Air University Press. He also served as the human intelligence collector and Korean linguist for the US Army. And he also taught at various institutions of higher learning at the United States. Welcome, sir. I now would also like to extend a warm welcome to the scholars who have joined us through the Zoom and are watching us live on Facebook. We are extremely glad to witness your presence here with us. Now, without any further ado, I would kindly request Dr. Jayaprasad, sir, to take the session forward. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Very good afternoon. A small correction, Muskan. All are esteemed panelists. Please correct. All are our esteemed panelists. They are all high-profile dignitaries. All are esteemed panelists. My apologies on behalf of Muskan to all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Warm good afternoon. And respected Professor Nagalakshmi Raman, Director and Head Amity Institute of International Studies, members of Amity Fraternity, expert panel, guests and dear students. Good afternoon, namaskar. First of all, I would like to congratulate Professor Nagalakshmi and her team for organizing such a wonderful 3-day webinar, which focuses on the dynamics of Asia Pacific region. In the last year also, she organized such an excellent program. And I also participated. Today, I am much thanks. I am for the faculty and the department head for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And also today with us, such an excellent panel, senior learned persons are with me. I am not taking much time, only 2-3 words from me. I would like to add the term Indo-Pacific because now India also started to play in this region. And India has been compelled to take a clear stand on regional issues. Fortunately, today our Prime Minister is in USA to participate in the along with other programs the Quad Summit also. And the region cover the great civilizations in the world. 59% of the world population resides in this region. Four largest populated countries like China, India, USA, Indonesia are here. And also the four largest economies are hosted by this region, namely the USA, China, Japan, and India. Even though the Korean Peninsula remained tense after the Second World War, generally Asia Pacific sustained with peace and development. Economic development of Association of Southeast Asian Nations, also South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, along with Japan and China and India are the best examples. I will say that after the First World War, Japan tried for hegemony in this region, and that failed. And also the People's Republic of China should learn a lesson from Japan. What happened for Japan's initiatives, especially for the hegemonic ambitions after with the culmination of the Second World War. And the post-Cold War scenario created an atmosphere for economic growth. Generally, in this region, there was, you can see such a great growth, especially after the post-Cold War period. And China is the largest beneficiary of this post-Cold War Asia Pacific region, the climate in the Asia Pacific region. And unfortunately, the economic growth has been accompanied by political mistrust. People's Republic of China's aggressive stand in India-China border, in Taiwan, in South China Sea, along with the North Korean nuclear ambitions, disturb the balance of power in the region. Definitely, Australia, United Kingdom, USA, and also the Quad will shape the future destiny of India-Pacific. Compared with the Atlantic and Europe up to the Second World War, the Asia-Pacific region offered a good climate for international peace and security. And as I noted earlier, the Japanese adventure for superiority finally resulted in the nuclear attack by USA and also the end of the Second World War. And today we are discussing the Asia Pacific region in a different manner, various aspects of this region. And for the last 1.5 years, this region became more and more in the news because of the COVID pandemic and the aggressive Chinese posture in the region, not only in the region, especially to its neighbors, also created some apprehension. And as a result, the Quad summit is going to meet today, and definitely our discussion will benefit for further helping further studies in this area. And with these words, I would like to invite our senior panelists of today, namely Dr. Amit Kumar Mishra, Sri M.R. Ranganathan, Sri Dr. Srikant Mishra, and Ernest Gunashekhara. I welcome you all to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Divya, so what is the format we are going to follow? Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Professor.
Amit Kumar Mishra.
Oh, Okay, so
Okay, sir, please go ahead. So I think that you can take around 20 minutes.
okay. So I present. Okay, so that is what I was asking. That what is the format we are going to follow? Thank you, Professor Jayaprasad, Chair. Thank you, Professor Dr. Nagalakshmi, ma'am, and the organizer, Dr. Divya, all my dear friends. I'm now visiting MIT for a couple of years. You know, it's a delight to see something like this happening. Though I still am a little nervous coming into this kind of a forum. I'm basically a student of history, so when I get into IR kind of thing, or core IR with so many illustrious panelists, I feel a little weak in my knees. But anyway, let me bring my 2 cents. So before getting into the thing, let me talk about, because the title of the panel is about, prospective context. So something about the prospect, something about the future, something about, but, it's a very interesting time that we are sitting in. We are sitting at a, like almost on the edge of uncertainty. COVID, the way it came, the way it came back again, so kind of, forced us to rethink about how do we look at future, or, what kind of take do we have on the future? Because at the moment, where we are is kind of an, amazing age of uncertainty. Everything from strategic assemblage to geopolitics to people's life to, personal to collective, national, global, everything is on the edge of uncertainty, contests and claim, clashing visions, competing models. So how do we go ahead? And in that, then, I go back to almost, 4.5 years to Thomas Hobbes, in his very classic text called Leviathan. Many of you must have been students of political science. So again, forgive me for taking away your classic scholar. In 1651, Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes says, the present only has a being in nature. Things past have a being in memory only. But things to come have no being at all. The future, but a fiction of mind. So with this kind, and with this kind of uncertainty, which the world order is into, let me hold on, not sound too much pessimistic or losing hope. Let me bring in two things. What I would like to discuss in terms of the perspectives for the context for the Asia Pacific as a kind of a configuration, regional, strategic, geopolitical configuration. Two points, and which are both linked. I mean, the second one is taking into the first one. From two vantage points, two entry points, rather, I would like to say, into the debate. Also, I have the burden of initiating the panel discussion. So the first is the very idea of Asia Pacific, and as Chairperson pointed out, so what lies ahead for this? What is there? What are the prospects for this? Because we see a lot of signs of shifts, transitions, uncertainties, new kind of terms, new kind of regions coming up, new kind of trade pacts, defense strategic exercises coming up. So what is there? What lies ahead in this very heavy term called the Asia Pacific? So I'd like to see the major discursive shifts in this by looking at the large trajectory of transformation from Asia Pacific into the Indo-Pacific. So Indo-Pacific for me, though it's been there for some time and there is more and more emphasis here, I would like to see it as a kind of, not as a dismantling of the Asia Pacific idea, but an addition to, as a kind of a prospective, forthcoming thing, a building up on the very idea of Asia Pacific. So the trajectory would be from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific. The second point, which I would like to basically discuss in my few minutes, is that, then what is there for India into it? Because, long ago, when the very idea of Asia Pacific came, and as we all know, for a long time, the global politics being dominated and kind of that way, everything emerging from United States, when the first idea of Asia Pacific came, India had no place into it. The very idea, the very geographical definition, the regions included into India was not there at all. So, and now, whatever with certain limitations, which I'll be coming to towards the end, India is there. So what is there in this dynamic shift of the global geopolitics, of these formations from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific? What is there for India? How it has engaged, how it is trying to reformulate, re-articulate its engagement, particularly with Prime Minister Modi's, the famous, what was that, 2018, keynote, and, et cetera, et cetera. So what do we do, or what India is looking at in that sense? Because India is very delicately positioned in this region. Can we really avoid something on the borders with China into 5,000 miles away into Pacific? And so how we are into this delicate situation, and that is what where I would like to see the prospective context for India as a nation. So let me kind of come to the first one. The very idea of and this very transition from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific. What are the kind of factors, essentials, contours of these transitions, etc., etc. I would like to give a caveat here, and that is how I'm looking at these reasons and these territorial geopolitical formations, as that we need to look at these formations as fluid formations. We should not, when we are talking about Asia Pacific or when we are talking about Indo-Pacific, we should not be somewhere getting fixed into the idea of territoriality. I would like to, though it's not apt and there's a lot of problematic with the post-colonial jargonism, but I would like to bring into the jargon, one very quoted or used jargon called deterritorialization. So fluidity is one, and the deterritoriality is the second. So when we are talking about the territories, when we are talking about these formations, they are territorial, but they are fluid. And if we bring that kind of a framework of fluidity, then we will be able to understand the complexity and the dynamic nature of these configurations and the prospects in that way into a more comprehensive and easy way, rather than getting trapped into the rigidity, the inflexible structures, It's not dismantling, but it's a kind of a gradual transition. It's an expansion. It's being more inclusive rather than being territorially fixed and therefore exclusive. And so, so that's how, Asia Pacific, South Asia, I said India was not included, but rather actually the entire South Asia was not included. But the geopolitics of world gradually started changing in certain way, where South Asia emerged as a very, very important region of the world, from market to conflict, to dispute, to nuclear threat. I mean, whatever you can see challenge to the global peace, whatever one can kind of, bringing upon, whether we are bringing into US-centric or Euro-centric or whatever centric lens we are using. The second is, and that is where we need to see again this dynamic thing, is then about Africa. So South Asia and then Africa, and then expansion of Africa, emergence of Africa as a huge, Africa is no longer the source of slaves. Africa was always great, always very, very crucial into the development and emergence of the global capitalism. The American cotton, the American fortune built on the slavery. But then Africa was always neglected into the larger geopolitical, considerations. Sources of slaves were not humans. So how much attention do you want to pay? And once slavery was abolished, the new kind of labor comes. That is what I study in my research. Then Africa almost lost it. Africa became the kind of the plantation. Jao wahan sugar paida karo, or sugar, you further your capitalist enterprise somewhere else, not in Africa. So Africa comes as an important, with the certain transitions in the global capitalism and geopolitical order, Africa becomes very important. So increasingly, I'm giving you an alternative. Normally we discuss these as a China-centric thing, and that is very important. I'm not denying. I'm trying to add a footnote to it about the new considerations, about the inclusion of new territories. So when you have to include Africa into this very, very important region, and as Chair said, so much of population, 60% of the population, 47% of the global trade, 60% of the world GDP, then when you have to bring in Africa, then you have to reconfigure, and the reconfiguration has led to and we see even Indo-Pacific largely as a US pushed thing to contain China. But the idea was also there in 2007 when Japanese Premier Abe said, putting together Pacific and Indian, the two biggest oceans in the world. That is where the future lies. As 80s, the future was in Pacific. A very, very renowned, amazing scholar. I had an opportunity to be with him in a workshop sometime back not sometime back, about a decade back. Arif Darlik, so Arif Darlik talked about 80s. He has an amazing book, and also he inserted cultural formations into this very geopolitical IR kind of thing. That is also why I'm a great admirer of Arif Darlik. Darlik talked about 80s Pacific as the future. I mean, everyone talked about, but Darlik talked about it from a different lens. And so the new, and that is in the midst of the Cold War, etc. The Pacific was the future, but then gradually with changes, China, Africa, etc. Indian Ocean is equally important. And Indian Ocean is, if you look at also the map, trade routes, etc. It's not that Indian Ocean was never important. In the larger global capitalism, if you look at a bit of history of it, then Indian Ocean always was very important, particularly after the Suez Canal opening. So in that sense, then how do we look at the future? And the big statesman, Japanese premier, US president, defense secretary, secretary of state, Australia, Canada, India also in a bit, a latecomer, but once this project takes off, then India gets that natural leverage of its very strong presence in Indian Ocean. Then merging of the oceans, kind of looking at the contact zones. The world always operates on the contact zones. Nowhere, never we talked about, even when United States was talking about US for, America for Americans, then its capitalism was not territorially bound. It was always global. Britain, even being very racist and particular about the white, British capitalist enterprise was always very global, always very transnational. So in this kind of a context, the convergence is being felt as the need of the hour. How do you converge? Converge is when you are trying to bring into Indian Ocean into this larger assemblage game, strategic considerations, economic considerations. Then you have to think about new terms. You have to think about, how to be inclusive. So if we continue to talk about Asia Pacific, then we are missing then Indian Ocean. So then, so in that ways, then what we do is what the trajectory we have is a kind of a gradual shift from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific, basically expansion. I don't see it as dismantling, but I see it as being more inclusive and expansion, moving toward a much larger global assemblage, which now has the two biggest oceans. And then, the landmass, also the very strategic routes, Malacca, straits, the entire Indian Ocean trade route. And then that is where I see a lot of future for India then, because India, which was absolutely excluded geographically into the Asia Pacific debates, has now an amazing advantage. Look at our position in Indian Ocean. Okay, so that is where I'm trying to look at, but not undermining and not kind of, denying the core of it, that China plays and has played a very, very important role in the formation of Asia Pacific, as well as into the new, relatively new, it's not very new, but relatively new idea of the Indo-Pacific. But then, how do we look at Indo-Pacific and how Indo-Pacific is going to shape in future is not so much US dominated anymore. There are now divergent views, like Kenneth Pomeranz talks about the great divergence. We have the divergence now. The world is reconfigured in certain way, and particularly the very recent happenings in Afghanistan will come back or will determine a lot of it in very definitive way. Is that okay? So Indo-Pacific, United States, leading into the idea, talking about it basically as a containment strategy. China is dominating. So you come with an idea that China is very aggressive. China is a threat to the peace, progress, whatever, into the region. And then you need to have a larger, territorial playground so you can contain China in certain way. You look for the new partners so you can contain China. You will find new partners only when you expand the territory. So you are expanding it into the Indian Ocean as well. A very recent set of declassified documents from United States, as early, very recent, like say 2021, March, April, where the goal is, and that's one of the documents says, the goal is, US goal into, expanding from Asia Pacific to the Indo-Pacific is basically to maintain US strategic primacy. When you address press conference, you talk about peace, you talk about stability. But actually what is happening behind the doors, what is happening into the closed Pentagon meetings is that US primacy is being challenged. China is a threat, fine, but China is also a threat to the US primacy. Mind you, what I'm trying to underline here is that the world peace and prosperity is being used as synonym with the American privacy. This is where I see the problem. That what is good for America is being sold to the world as good for the world. Okay, it may be right, it may be wrong, but what I'm trying to say is that we need to problematize this. So US needs a credible partner, and then India becomes the credible partner. India is also market. Forget about a credible partner and credibility and ethical points into it, basically the market. So that way, then, what we have is an Indo-Pacific and the Americas taken into it. But then, what I said is that unlike Asia Pacific, where for a very long time, United States could hold its definitional attributes, in Indo-Pacific, it's not so much. Japan has a different take, and Japan actually was one country which talked about Indo-Pacific or the convergence of Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean for a much longer time. 2007, 2013, etc., much before the Trump's aggressive, selling of Indo-Pacific. So basically, it's linked with Sino-American rivalry, but it is not so much about it. Sino-American rivalry is not the only, factor here. We have a larger shift. We have a more divergent views. We have more power players now into the entire thing. We are setting into a new kind of a post-national cartography where the oceans are important, where national economies, nations' primacies are whether it is a superpower or whether it is a smaller partner, nations' primacies are no longer important. What is important in somewhere is a larger, kind of a economic processes, multi-site production processes, the way global capitalism has shaped. It cannot be contained into a nation. It is not that you produce your car into India and you sell it into India and you have a very profitable capitalist enterprise. You can see that into American automobile. American automobile, Ford, was centered into United States. And then Detroit today is a ghost town. What has taken over is a different kind of a model of global automobile industry, Germany, Japan. So in this kind of a post-national cartography, we cannot have one, and we actually don't have one. So when we are looking at it from the prospective context, then, so we have Japan, which disagrees with US definition of Indo-Pacific. We have, couple of other countries.
Amit Kumarji, please conclude. So that
okay, have I covered my 20 minutes? Okay, 3-4 minutes, okay. So we have Australia talking about a greater role into Pacific and Indian Ocean, different. Most important is, and that is where I'm getting into my second one, I don't have much time left, but let me kind of come into, is that India's take onto the Indo-Pacific. And that is very, very important. Because India is a very important ally, part of that larger Indo-Pacific strategic considerations. But then for India, India is careful. India has to be careful. Because as I told you in the beginning, we cannot contest and challenge China 5,000 miles away into Pacific. China is next door. So we have to, kind of set our priorities and primacies and conflicts and considerations into a very delicate and sensitive and realistic terms. And that is where, Prime Minister Modi's keynote into Shangri-La dialogue in 2018 comes as a very important take. And after that, taking from this, our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar's, opening a statement into a joint statement between Indian External Affairs Minister and US Secretary of State in 2019 is very important. Prime Minister Modi talks about it as a positive note. He says that, our vision, our take on Indo-Pacific is not about containing someone, is not against someone, but is for everyone. And that is where the realistic, assessment of the situation comes into. Building partnerships, being more inclusive, not to dominate and direct and discriminate any country, but for the largest prosperity and development of the Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister Modi was saying it in an ASEAN, kind of a grouping and Shangri-La dialogue. But what External Affairs Minister said, the same thing, was very important because he was saying it when he was sharing the stage with the American Secretary of State, and that is where India is realistic. But what we are looking at here is that we haven't been able to convert a lot of our, strategies from conversation into actual act. We have changed the name of our policy from look east into act east. We have done a lot of things. We have strategic partnerships with Japan. We have, things with New Zealand, etc. But we have missed the Southeast Asia. Singapore is the only one, and very important one we missed very recently. When we refused to sign on that trade, that's considered to be one of the biggest, trade treaties in the world at the moment. We did not sign it for, of course, the domestic considerations. And I'm not saying that India should be compromising on the domestic considerations, because we are a large economy, but we are a large population also. So we cannot allow that kind of a free trade, but that is strategically considering. India missed a lot of it. So we have to reconfigure, we have to reconsider, we have to look for new partners. We also have to look at our borders, because unlike a lot of other players into Indo-Pacific who don't have that kind of a border concerns immediately, and they look at and they play the larger, conflict or considerations somewhere a few thousand miles away into some ocean, we have right close border considerations, into West Pakistan, to China, to occasional disturbances with other countries in Southeast Asia. So opting out of RCEP, we need to re-articulate something. We have to look at our border priorities in a different way. The advantage in the future we have is our very strong presence in the Indian Ocean. So what we were missing into Asia Pacific kind of a geopolitical considerations, we can regain, we can re-articulate, because India is a very important player in the Indian Ocean Rim nation, that kind of a political strategic configurations. So we have to look at some of these. I have a few things more to say, but unfortunately, I was not very organized, as you could see. So I stop here. Maybe some of these things I'll pick up if there is some question and answer session. But thank you. I hope I could make some sense for the 20-25 minutes you gave me. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amit Kumar Misraji. Now I invite Sri M.R. Ranganathan to his presentation.
Sir, you're on.
Sir,
Yes, Sri M.R. Ranganathan, please. Can you hear me?
sir, you are on mute, sir.
Sri Ranganathan?
No, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, yes. Please,
Okay.
Ranganathan, please.
Yes, we are able to hear you.
All right. Dear Dr. Jayaprasad, the chairperson, my fellow panelists, Dr. Misra, A.K. Misra, and Dr. S. Misra, and Dr. Gunasekara, good afternoon. Dr. Divya Anand and Dr. Raman, it has been very, very considerate to call me for this event. Though I am not a panelist, last 2 days I've been getting myself educated, listening to some of the talks, because basically I'm not a political science guy, nor I'm into the geopolitics. I'm basically a civil engineer. The only thing is I've been into Japan for almost last 46 years. As you can see, my designation says Chairman ABK AOTS Dosokai Tamil Nadu Center. We are a non-profit alumni association of AOTS, which is under the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, called the Association for Overseas Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Partnership. We are in 42 countries, 72 alumni associations. I'm one of them. I would like to share my talk. I will certainly keep it within 15 minutes, I hope, with my PowerPoint presentation. I will share my presentation with all of you. One second. Okay, that's me. A country's geographical location, while plays a very important role in the geopolitics, the geography plays an important role in building a national culture and social values. Let me start my presentation with a simple introduction to the geography of Japan, which may be known to many, but I just want to show how it helped the Japanese to build their value systems, then show another important area of Japan-India cooperation, because I've been listening what is in future for Japan and India, which is going to mutually benefit both the countries, and especially many of our young boys and girls who are leaving the colleges, coming out with graduation degrees, and also with a lot of dreams in their eyes. Japan is going to be a great source of employment opportunities for them. I'm going to talk a little more on that, because this is going to be more focused on Indo and Japan, how this is going to help both the economies, providing very good opportunities for young talents and skills. Japan's culture and social aspects owe a lot to their geography. Japan consists of several thousand islands, out of which Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, and Shikoku are the 4 largest. There are nearly 6,800 smaller islands in Japan. I do not know how many of you know this number. Japan's closest neighbors are Korea, both north and south, and Russia and China. The shortest distance between India and Japan as a bird flies is 5,968 kilometers. Japan is about 9 times smaller than India. Japan is sitting on a ring of fire. The ring of fire is a string of volcanoes and sites of seismic activity or earthquakes around the edges of Pacific Ocean. Maybe that's where Japan is, into the Pacific Ring of Fire. There are 73% of Japan is mountainous. Japan's highest mountain, as you all be knowing, is Mount Fuji, which has an elevation of 3,776 meters high. Japan's forest cover is 68.55, and at no point Japan is more than 150 kilometers from sea. You can see it's a small country, but a lot of space occupied by mountains and forests. Japan feels occasional volcanic activity frequented by low intensity earth tremors, because of which there are a number of hot springs all over the country. Japan is generally a rainy country with high humidity. Destructive earthquakes occur several times in the century. These are 2 great earthquakes Japan had, one 1923 and 1967. Tsunami is a Japanese word which means harbor wave. Earthquakes under the sea are the main causes for tsunamis. The quick bouncing back of Japan from 11th March 2011 triple disaster caused by tsunami and a magnitude 9.0 quake leading to the meltdown of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. It's a standing example of the fighting spirit and resilience of the nation. Typhoons, called taifu in Japanese, are large low-pressure systems that can develop over Pacific Ocean. In India, we call them a cyclone. Typhoons bring torrential rainfall and winds up to 200 kilometers per hour. Japanese love nature. For them, nature is also God's. Nature had taught them great cultural values like harmony, patience, humility, perseverance, and spirit to bounce back. Japanese have learned to live with harmony with nature. Harmony has become an integral part of Japanese life. The basic cultural factor of Japan's life is to live in harmony in the society. There are three factors for Japan's bouncing back. Japanese people love nature, fear nature, and also live in harmony with nature. The basic love for nature is also very helpful in bouncing back after a calamity that they do not blame nature for suffering, but approach with patience, perseverance, and resilience. There are three factors called gaman, patience, kin, perseverance, and tairyaku, resilience. Following the crushing defeat, about which some of the panelists also today talk, after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the dominating spirit of what they call Japan, Yamato Damashi, the inherent Japanese spirit, was redirected to rebuilding the shattered country in exhibition of resilience and determination. Addressing the nation in 1945, His Majesty Emperor Hirohito famously said that we have resolved to endure the unendurable and suffer what is insufferable. Gaman is a Japanese term of Zen Buddhist origin, which means enduring, which means to do one's best in distress times and to maintain self-control and discipline. English language school chain Heian Corp had chosen perseverance, Nintai Ryoku, as the word of the year to describe Japan for the second consecutive year in 2014, year that saw maximum natural disorders. Perseverance was the top choice, and resilience came in second. What is resilience? It's a very old Japanese poem, English translated. Resilience is a virtue that enables one to go through hardship and suffering become better. No one can escape pain, suffering, and fear. Yet from pain, one can get wisdom. From fear, one can get courage. Yet from suffering, one can get strength. If only one has a virtue called resilience. Rice is so important in the Japanese society that it has been called the essence of the culture. Many aspects of Japanese social behavior originates from the rice cultivation, like harmony, consensus seeking, feeling of dependency, etc. Japanese families pool their labor, share their water resource and irrigation facilities. Maybe some lessons that India has to learn from Japan. People lived in houses clustered together and depended heavily upon each other. Rice cultivation necessitated the emphasis on group interest, the skills in group decision making, and avoided friction between the neighboring families. Diligence and details are a part of Japanese work life. Japanese people take their work very seriously. They have what they call as majime. They have a serious attitude and approach when working. Working steadily matters with patience, thoroughness, especially in preparation, and this is valued over speed and creativity. They believe that through thorough documentation allows context to speak for itself. Kaizen is an important work attitude. Work is equal to performance or operation, whatever you do, plus continuous improvement Kaizen. Their effort is steady and they believe in never giving up until they get it right. The matter of process of working often matters more than the results. Now, this is an interesting thing because many of you students of international relations, maybe in a Japanese company, you study international relations, but you may do some other work also because in Japan, everybody does many things to start with in their career. You learn. in one of the major Japanese companies, a fresh graduate joining. That after graduation, this morning we had a professor from APU, Dr. Sato. One of the students from APU joined this company, and the goals, the fresh graduates are asked to set his or her goals in 3 areas: learning, relationship building, and always face new challenges. They need to make a monthly presentation to the top management. The employee has to present in all the above 3 areas: the performance and also the improvement they have done in that, while presenting a review of the current month goals, which is equivalent to improvement of last month plus target improvements for the next month. Now, there is a word called jishin in Japanese, which means earthquake, and also it is called self-confidence. History has shown us that Japan has got both of them in plenty. Shimoguni Konjo is what they call the island mentality, has projected the Japanese as a country with a very conservative minded, yet with a fighting spirit. Japan being Itozu no Minzoku, that means one country, one race, has exhibited their own cultural traits which have withstood. Maybe people have talked about today about our own chairperson also talked about Japanese ambitions during the World War. That's one of the reasons why they all thought that the war was more they are serving for the God. That's one of the reasons when the Americans took over, they said the emperor has to come and declare himself as not divine. And the Shinto, which is a national religion, was removed, and then it's become religious affinity to Shinto was, what should I say, de-religion. Americans said that Shinto can no more be the national religion. And with the tides of time, this Itozu no Minzoku has helped them to stay together. Apart from the geopolitical threats from neighbors, Japan needs to bring in large foreign workforce to manage the demographic issues today Japan has got. That's what I'm going to talk about today. To maintain our position, global economy, and still this will change the Itozu no Minzoku. Japanese statistics are showing that the country's working age population will fall by 1.1% a year over the next 50 years. Foreigners at present account for only 2% of Japan's labor market. That compares to over 10% in other major developed economies, meaning that Japan has abundant capacity to make it more. Prime Minister Abe's administration has taken active steps in 2018 that could see 350,000 new foreign employees over the next 5 years. This is what I thought should be very, very inspiring to many of our young graduates who are passing out. This is what Inada-san, the key advisor, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, talked before Abe quit as the Prime Minister of Japan. The issue of foreign workers, of course, has got other issues. It's controversial one, where many Japanese worry about the capacity of outsiders to adapt to its language, traditions, and customs. India and Japan organize they both recognize the importance of this expanding Japanese language and culture education in India for the young talents and skills in different domains, being it as a mutually beneficial supply and demand situation. Memorandum of cooperation in the field of Japanese language education in India was signed during the visit of Japanese Prime Minister to India in 2017, when he was invited as a chief guest for the Republic Day function in New Delhi. Japanese government estimates that over half of all the women born in 1990 will stay married to the age of 50. About 25% may never marry, and 35% of them will never have babies. That means that over half of the women in this birth group will not have grandchildren. If these current patterns continue, each generation will be 35% smaller than the previous one. Japan has one of the healthiest populations in the world and one of the longest life expectancies, projected to increase from 86 to 90 for women and 79 to 84 for men by 2055. This is by the National Bureau of Asian Research called NBR. NBR has got a lot of some of the students who are in the research, please go through NBR. It has got a lot of interesting research papers in the area of Asia Pacific and what is happening. Okay, the national average is 28.7% of old age people or 65 or older, the highest in the world. Japan's tally of centurions, its record of 86,500, and women account for 88% of them. Now, if you look at this as a projection from United Nations, from 2020 onwards, India will be the country with the lowest of elderly population with age. You see, we are the lowest of the graph, and the highest being Japan. And so India will be able to take care of the manpower needs of Japan. The key will be Japanese language proficiency. Now, the statistics of foreign residency in India, in Japan, shows numbers are increasing surely and steadily. In recent years, there have been change in the composition of Indian community with the arrival of large number of professionals, including IT professionals, engineers working for Indian and Japanese firms, as well as professionals in management, finance, education, and science and technology and research. Now, if you kindly look at the table on the right-hand side, India is there now with 40,000 Indian families in Japan. So apart from the professionals, that's inclusive of the family members too. And if you look at way back in 1990s, we were 2,000, we were 3,000 and we have become 40,000. If you look at Nepal, they were just 400. Today they are double ours. They have become 1 lakh people are working for Nepal alone. If you look at small countries like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, they are right behind our this thing. Every one of them is really looking east. Today, it was also pointed out that from look east, we should move into being in east. Now, India is now should look at Japan as a, because we have been looking more on the west. Now today we have to look at east. Now, if you look at the working force population accounting, this is again given by the World Bank. From this, there's a report made by ABD report, how to fill the working age population gap in Asia. The population accounting approach using UN population projection says, PRC, People Republic of China, which is the largest workforce from 1950 until 2015, will be overtaken by India. So, with 1 billion by 2030 and more than 1.1 billion by 2050. So, this is going to have a big difference in the area of, in the region of India, Asia Pacific. If you look at, we have projected all the countries in Asia, and suddenly you can see India is jumping over and above all. And the last column is 2050, we are going to have the largest. Whether good or bad is a different thing, but that is going to get you people in the working age who are available to take up jobs wherever there is a possibility. So when India is going through a tough employable, we have a tough situation of employment opportunities missing, but we have a large force of good educated youth. So this could be a good chance for us to look at Japan as a place where we can move our, and also Indian students are not on the top of the 5 studying in Japan. That may be another place where we are missing opportunity. Now Japan needs Indian graduates, especially in IT, manufacturing, agriculture and nursing. With curriculum offered in English in many cases, many colleges, many universities in the undergraduate and mostly postgraduates are in English. And there are a number of scholarships. The teachers are mixed teachers from Japan and the West. And with this, some of them are also from Asia. There are plenty of scholarships and legally permitted limited part-time work under the student visa, which should be give you enough funds to take care of your accommodation, food. A lot of education in the universities and the society outside. Easy visa regulations, demand for foreign graduates for jobs. India should now capitalize by focusing on Japanese language and culture to study and work in Japan. Japan Foundation, an organization which takes care of Japanese language, was established by Government of Japan in October 1972 as a special legal entity. Based on government endowment of 78 billion yen, the activities of the Japan Foundation are focused on promoting globally Japanese language culture and conduct JLPT, Japanese language proficiency tests, all over the globe on the first Sunday in July, first Sunday in December. And in India itself, there are a number of places where you can take up the test. With demographic shift and current COVID situation, there is an urgent need for young talents for jobs in Japan from outside Japan with Japanese skills, which has made JLPT very important. Japan Foundation opened an office in New Delhi in 1993. During the Japan-India Summit meeting held in 14th September 2017, a Japan-India joint statement was signed in the field of Japanese language education in India to establish Japanese language certificate courses in 100 universities, colleges, and institutions to train 1,000 Japanese language teachers in next 5 years. This is signed by both the Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Abe and our Prime Minister Modi. But there seems to be a growing trend among Japanese firms towards looking to hire foreign talent again once the pandemic calms down, and number of domestic firms looking for recruit from abroad this fall, that's by this October onwards, has recovered from 70% to 80% of pre-pandemic levels, and attracting engineers from India home to scores of up and coming tech workers has been a hot recruitment trend among Japanese firms. This was published in Japan Times on the 17th of August 2021 this year. Japanese Prime Minister Suga plans to establish a new digital agency, but this faces a big challenge. There is not enough IT engineers. So not only IT is one, manufacturing, agricultural farm workers, nurses, nursing assistants, and home givers. Of course, there are enough scope for people in areas of research, and many of our professors go and teach in Japanese universities also. In the April 2019 survey by Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry found demand for IT workers in Japan would exceed the supply by 3 lakh by 2020, exceed the supply. And the shortfall that is expected to swell to 4,50,000 by 2030. The Embassy and Consulate General of Japan and Consulate Generals of Japan in India, JETRO, Japanese External Trade Organization, has compiled with the support of Japanese Chambers of Commerce and Industry a list of Japanese companies in India. This is again another great opportunity for people to look for growth and employment. Number of Japanese companies registered in India in 1455, and number of Japanese business establishments is nearly 5,000. Now, many of these companies are today not only looking for IT, even others. My own granddaughter, who finished her internet studies, today is working in domestic sales in a cosmetic company. So, in a Japanese company, your graduation does not mean that you have to go into the same field. It's very open. You grow in the company, learn technology, learn how to work, you take new challenges, how to network with people. These are very important skills that they talk about. With almost all Indian companies working Japanese clients, those who wish to work with Japanese IT partners, irrespective of the size, are looking for bilingual, Japanese, English knowing Japanese, and Japan is in need of a large pool of skilled workforce from overseas, which can very well be filled by Indian resources. Japan presents a good opportunity for Indian employment. So I'm just saying, irrespective of whatever is happening in the geopolitical, there is an opportunity for us to go and for our young people, because definitely over a period of time, India is going to have the largest pool of people, and we have good education. Japanese always think, 46 years with Japan, all my Japanese friends say, India is a country where zero was invented. They think Indians are very good in mathematics. There are Indian schools into which Japanese mothers want to put their children because they want their children to become very good in mathematics. So Japan presents a very great opportunity because they all think Indians are very bright. So there is a good opportunity, and this will certainly have an impact on the Indian economy and the life of individuals, because people after education, the life has to change with employment. The key will be understanding the socio-cultural aspects of Japanese and the working knowledge of Japanese language which will make a differentiator in our young graduates. So with that, I conclude. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri M.R. Rangarajan.
Yes, sir.
It's an excellent presentation, and he has given such a wider opportunity to the Indian youth. It is an opening, maybe it is an opening to the Indian academic community also. Thank you, sir. Now I invite Dr. Srikanth Misra for the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay, at the outset, good evening and good afternoon to everyone. I sincerely thank Amity University, Amity Institute of International Studies, NICE Nepal for organizing this and giving me this opportunity to interact with this panel and others. And also, I sincerely thank Professor Nagalakshmi and Dr. Sri Pathak for inviting me to be part of this very, very intellectual, stimulating panel. I think, my previous speakers have very broadly laid down the background in which I really can now build up, and particularly from the strategic point of view or the hardcore issues. I think the first speaker, Dr. Misra, was talking about things to come. When we talk about prospect, it's all about things to come. And he was quoting actually, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, where he was telling that when you want to predict something or the things to come, you can't be certain. It's very uncertain, and rightly so. When you think about Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific, the way it is unfolding, we can't be in black and white. We cannot really conclude things in black and white because it's really difficult to conclude on something that is unfolding. So building upon that particular narrative or methodology, let me come to raise a few questions which are actually my conclusions, but I will put a question mark at the end to be on the safer side, because always in research we have been advised to keep some room for correction. So three important questions I'm going to raise, and I will analyze them, introspect on them. I leave for this August gathering to really, throw some light further. So let me start with the question that is the first question, which is for a long time it is now debated in this domain, and that is the first question, that is Quad the Asian NATO? And this is not a new question. Over the last few years, we are hearing about this question, whether Quad, the quadrilateral initiative or the dialogue that is already in the process. And right now, all the four countries, leaders present in Washington, DC, going to talk about it. So the fundamental question that strikes everyone when we talk about Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific is all about the institution, the Quad, which is not yet a formal organization, no structure yet. But yes, there is a lot of prospect. Whether Quad is going to become the NATO type of organization, and those who don't know about NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is a colder product. It was raised or standing against the Soviet expansion in the world. Now, when you see China is expanding in the different parts of the world, especially in the Asia-Pacific or what you call Indo-Pacific, is Quad going to stand up like NATO during the Cold War? So this is an old debate. I mean, nothing new I'm talking here. But if you look at the debate, it is very binary. It is actually, dividing lines. A lot of American officials have very clearly said that, yes, it is a kind of Asian type of NATO. Yes, of course, they came out very outrightly, but gradually they, withdrew their statements. But nevertheless, it is from American side, American intellectuals who have given a NATO type of characteristic to the Quad. And a lot of American officials have told, in fact, it is a bulwark against a potential challenge from China. And some Chinese view the initiative is also equally an US handiwork for an Asian version of the NATO. So China has got the message, America has given the message. Now, when you look at other members like India, how India view it, China has noticed it very clearly. But when you look at Indian point of view, India has been very, very soft. India has never bought the argument of, NATO type of, structure for Quad for its membership. So you find a bit of ambivalence from Indian point of view when you look at the nature or nomenclature of the Quad organization. So you find a kind of, there is no fortitude of NATO in Quad at the moment because the group has no badge yet. It has not come out full-fledged. So prognostication on the future of the Quad is not really simple. I cannot give, in fact, a black and white answer to this first question that whether Quad is the Asian NATO. If you look at other partners like Australia and even some other countries like Singapore, for that matter, they have dissociated from the Malabar naval exercise. In fact, they were interested initially. India invited them, but gradually they somewhere got a kind of sense that probably China will take it differently, and they tried to dissociate from this military exercise. So you find a bit of ambivalence not only in Indian side, but somewhere in the East Asian countries and Australia about the nomenclature and the nature of NATO and its activities. So then the question is Quad then a manifestation or a response to the China threat as the background condition, what we see today, the Chinese expansionist strategy? In fact, Quad was born in a response to the crisis resulted because of the tsunami that happened in 2004. If you look at the history of Quad, the way it evolved, it was in fact a kind of coordinating agency, not Quad. In fact, that time it was a kind of crisis response mechanism, which evolved to a kind of nomenclature called Quad today. So the background or emergence of, or the reason of this grouping is a crisis response. Now, the question obviously can be raised that if China is going to cause another type of crisis in Asia Pacific, will Quad come up to a level where it can stand against China's expansionist strategy? That's a big question which we don't have any clear-cut answer. If you look at Indian side, India hosted the Malabar exercise. India is providing all the logistics and everything for this military exercise. But will Quad eventually be an Asian NATO? If you look at from this military exercise, the question somewhere is very answers to this question somewhere is mixed because the military exercise is not the only objective of Quad. There are n number of other objectives listed, starting from renewable energy to vaccination drive. Lot more other things are on the Quad plate. So you can't really now characterize Quad as a military grouping, given the multifarious objectives of Quad, or the plate is really full with a lot more other beside the military aspirations. So right now there can be no definite answer to all these intriguing questions. And whether Quad will come up to a level of NATO structure, we can't be sure. But yes, one of the foundation objectives of Quad, whether you like it or not, or some of the members of the panel may not agree to it, but what I see, one of the primary objectives of Quad was a military kind of a front vis-a-vis China. So that's what conclusion that I have. But yes, I put a question mark whether it will be or not. At the end, the third question will really answer this particular question as well. The second question that I want to raise is specifically to India. Could India or can India meet or capable of meeting the expectation of the Quad, or for that matter, United States? If United States is the brain behind the Quad and India and all other like-minded countries have joined, then is India really meeting the expectations? Is India really capable of meeting the expectations when you look at from military point of view or the NATO type of structure point of view? Definitely, one of the objectives that I reiterate of Quad is to counter or limit the Chinese expansionary movements in Asia Pacific. Whether you like it or not, but this is one of the primary objectives. Has India really contributed to achieve this objective, and how far India can go, in fact, to build up Quad in that nature? Although military cooperation between India, US, Australia, and Japan has started, and these countries have carried out several joint exercises, including exercise Malabar in the past, but there is a long way to go. containment of China is an imperative, definitely, but India should become the regional anchor, which is the expectation of America, in fact. If there is a transition from Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific, of course, Indian Ocean is the anchor point. And when you talk about Indian Ocean, of course, India is the anchor point. So by default, in Indo-Pacific, India is the anchoring country. Now in Quad, of course, India is the anchoring country, but can India really come to a level where it can contribute to the evolution of Quad to a military grouping in future? That's a big question mark. So India should become a regional anchor to build an Indo-Pacific containment of China. That's a big question, whether can India really meet that expectation. To counter China, I think India needs to have a strong military coalition in the future, which is not really visible at the moment. And if you look at the Indian analysts' point of view, what they think, what the internal debate about Quad and India's role, I think I came across a very wonderful article by Professor Rajesh Rajagopalan of JNU, where he says very categorically that New Delhi has until now assumed that it can largely free ride on the balancing efforts of others and get the best of both worlds. Such buck-passing strategies work if others are motivated enough to bear these burdens by themselves. But this approach becomes risky because everyone could suffer if all stakeholders pass the buck. Containment is an even more difficult sell if a country as strong as India continues to free ride. So India cannot expect more from America when it is not really ready to come up to a level where it can pose a great or straightforward threat to China. That was probably the expectation of America. If I would love to see the counter view. So to my point, I think India has not come to a level where US can really rely today on India and making it an anchor point in the Quad or Indo-Pacific region. The Quad leaders will have to really work out of its structure, and I think we will have it within a day or two because the meeting is now scheduled in Washington, DC, and this is the first physical meet of the Quad platform. Probably we will expect something concrete to come out, and we have to wait and watch. So the prospect is definitely pregnant. We don't know which way it will come out. Now the third question is a corollary of the first one, and two question is, which is very latest development, and it is unfolding. Again, I cannot conclude on this, and that is the new type of grouping that is going to come up, or a kind of trilateral grouping that is floated very recently by America, and that is called AUKUS, AUKUS if you pronounce it. A stands for Australia, UK stands for United Kingdom, and US stands for United States of America. This is a trilateral grouping that America has floated only this month on September 16, and probably this is what going to become a primarily military grouping or organization in which Australia is going to become the anchor point, because America has indicated that it will going to transfer or give the nuclear submarines to Australia, and also some naval bases there. So probably America is trying to prepare Australia as the anchor point in the Indo-Pacific. In that case, you are going to have two groupings. One is Quad, which is already doing a lot of other works, and then a new kind of organization is proposed, and that is AUKUS. Then you have another institutional arrangement in this region. That how these two are going to function, we don't know, and it's very uncertain. Whether it is going to overshadow Quad, AUKUS is going to overshadow Quad, or there will be kind of complementary to each other, we don't know. In that case, if it is actually complementary, then probably United Kingdom will be part of Quad in the future. Or if AUKUS can be really expanded, I think very recently America has rejected the assertion that Japan and India will be part of AUKUS. They have outrightly said it's not going to be expanded. So there is no prospect of India or any other member to become part of this trilateral military grouping, which is going to become the anchor point of Indo-Pacific. So Australia is, of course, willing to play that role. It seems Australia's strategic environment is changing. and Beijing has taken very serious note of it. And because Australia is willing to now come up to a level where America can rely on its containment of China's strategy. So Beijing is more rattled by AUKUS than Quad, it seems, at this point of time. So which way AUKUS and Quad is going to collaborate, or whether they're going to overlap or they're going to complement, we will wait and watch. So to my understanding, to conclude, in fact, definitely there is another layer of overlapping of Quad is coming up, which might cast a shadow on Quad, or it might complement. In that case, what will be the nature of United Kingdom, which is a new player in the Indo-Pacific, it seems right now? Will UK be part of the Quad, or AUKUS will remain as independent body? Are the questions which need a definite answer. And I don't have any answer. As I told, when we're looking at the prospect of a region, we can only predict, but with a question mark. I will stop here. Thank you very much for this. I look forward to your interventions and questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Srikanth Mishra. And now I invite our fourth presentation, Dr. Ernest Gunashekara. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And thank you to Amity University and the International Studies Institute, and NICE for the wonderful invitation to participate today. And thank you to my fellow panelists for your brilliant presentations. First, before I get going, I have to provide this disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed or implied in my presentation are mine alone and should not be construed as carrying the official sanction of the Department of Defense, my employer, Air Force, Air Education and Training Command, Air University, or other agencies or departments of the U.S. government or their international equivalents. That out of the way, it'll be pretty clear that I don't give the official government sanctioned perspective anyway. Obviously, you know, as the director of the Consortium of Indo-Pacific Researchers and the editor-in-chief of the the Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs, I've bought pretty much full stock into the Indo-Pacific construct. And building upon what my colleague Srikanth Mishra was saying, you know, moving forward, there are different paths that we can see as possibilities in the Indo-Pacific. The most likely one, I think, is continued and increased great power competition between the United States and its allies and partners in the region, and China, and the faction that it's trying to build in that region as well. There's no reason to to assume that Xi Jinping and China are going to diverge from the course that they're currently on. In fact, as we get closer and closer to their 2049 plan, one can assume that there will be increased Chinese aggression. Taiwan being probably the most obvious in terms of wanting to have it reunified with the mainland before that 2049 date that they've set for themselves. And on the other side of the equation, then we have what others have brought up is the Quad. Does it further institutionalize and become something more akin to the NATO that Srikanth was talking about? It doesn't need to necessarily mirror NATO completely, obviously, in moving towards institutionalization. In fact, one of the ideas that I've talked about in other presentations is the idea of dusting off the old SEATO treaty, the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization from back from the 50s to the 70s. Obviously, that one was aimed at a different audience and participants and everything, because it was a construct of the Vietnam era. But if you look at the actual text of the document, it could be pretty readily applied to what we're pursuing, I think, as the Quad, if we were to institutionalize it as a treaty. However, there are some indications that maybe the Quad isn't what we thought it was, or maybe the U.S. commitment to the Quad isn't what we thought it was. And I think AUKUS, which Srikanth also brought up, can be seen in both ways. We could look at it as a step toward institutionalization, we're finally, trying to get everybody on the same page with in terms of building up Australia, which had been seen in Quad 1.0 as the weakest link in the organization. And in fact, it was Prime Minister Rudd's idea to pull out of Quad back in 2007 that led to the demise of Quad 1.0. And so this is kind of a shoring up then of the Australian capabilities and a reification of the relationship between the Australians and the United States, and adding in the extra component of the United Kingdom there. So it could be seen as a step towards institutionalization, but as Sitakant also mentioned, and we've already said we're not doing the same thing for our other partners, India and Japan. So what exactly does that say about the Quad? And it's rather perplexing. We bemoan the fact that India has a lack of interoperability with our systems. 90% of Indian systems are Soviet or Russian made and not compatible with Western weapon systems. And at the very same time, when we have a program like this that's aimed at providing those kinds of systems to our partners in the region, we leave India out. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And to some extent, then the America's poor diplomatic performance of late has to be worrisome for our allies and partners in the region. And whether it's the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was done extremely haphazardly, and did not apparently take into consideration concerns that India might have. I mean, India poured, a boatload of treasure into developing Afghanistan, into developing the Chabahar port, to open up the economy of Afghanistan to the outside. And it doesn't look, at least on face value, that we took any of that into consideration, or letting loose a rabid dog basically in the backyard of India, in letting the Taliban just roll back into power and unleashing another wave of terror throughout the region. So these are things that could derail the Quad. So perhaps America now represents the weakest link in Quad 2.0. The change in Japanese leadership, which is coming next week, and then again in November, conceivably, when they hold elections, is disconcerting too. It comes at a crucial juncture of the development of the Quad. We were already kind of reeling a little bit from the loss of Prime Minister Abe, who stepped down due to health concerns recently. Prime Minister Suga's leadership has been a little bit has lacked the luster, I guess you would say, of Abe, just personality differences, although he's tried to stay the course pretty well. It really depends on who they select as the next prime minister, and whether that person has the capability to win re-election in November, as to what the course of Japan's policies towards the Quad and other issues in the region might be. So a lot of uncertainty, as others have mentioned, in the region, and no definitive answers. And we hope, obviously, that the Quad summit that's going on today and starting today will provide some of those answers. But if you look at some of the previous meetings, although not in person and frequently not the heads of state, it really seems that they always kick the issues down the road instead of actually coming up with answers at these things. In previous iterations, there's been very little, if any, mention of China whatsoever, even though, as Sitakant properly mentions, China is very key to what the whole idea of the Quad is. Whether we're trying to counter them militarily or diplomatically or informationally or economically, China's there, and it's on the other side of the equation, and it's something that we have to react to. And so if we don't talk about it, and don't talk about it to the point that we need to, and actually build some concrete actions based on that conversation, then what is Quad? If it's just going to remain a dialogue, perhaps it's useful, but if we don't institutionalize it, then it loses a lot of the the power that it could, the potential that it has to be a driving force in the region. And then we're back to, you know, bilateral and minilateral types of solutions that end up with a spoke and hub model, kind of like what we've had historically in the region. You know, the other thing is, you know, China's not just sitting back on its laurels, right, and waiting for us to come up with a response. They're practicing wolf warrior diplomacy. They're using COVID and the vaccines as a diplomatic lever. They continue to use debt trap lending to strip sovereignty away from the nations of the Indo-Pacific. Sri Lanka, obviously, probably the poster child for that, with the Hambantota port deal, where, you know, they lend, you know, an exorbitant amount of money to a country that they know full good and well will not be able to pay it back, and they don't want them to pay it back because they want to grab the land and have that dual use facility where if push comes to shove and we actually go to war, that they're able to use that port or, you know, industrial base or whatever it may be for their purposes in the military effort. And you know, we got Port City Colombo now in Sri Lanka, which is going to end up the same way. Again, lending gross amounts of money for a project that will, you know, provide very little for the average Sri Lankan, but, you know, makes the elite class wealthier as they pocket money from the deal itself, and as they make real estate transactions and whatnot that also provide them with wealth without putting their countries first. And we see the same situation unfolding in Pakistan with Gwardar and the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Again, you know, massive amounts of loan monies that the Pakistanis will not be able to repay, and China will gladly take the port and the economic corridor as compensation. And now, you know, Afghanistan, with our withdrawal, China is looking to move in there and capitalize on that new opportunity. Obviously, it presents challenges too, but, you know, you have massive amounts of rare earth minerals there that will drive their you know, computer or high-tech industries, their auto industries, and things of that nature for years and years to come. And you have the Taliban, you know, slobbering all over themselves, waiting for those massive amounts of money to pour in that they've seen poured into to Pakistan and Sri Lanka. And, you know, it's going to fill their coffers, allow them to, you know, either, we'll see, either to develop some of their country and say, hey, look, I did a better job than the last guys, or, you know, line their own bank accounts, whatever the case may be. But again, that puts Afghanistan firmly in the China camp. And, you know, so that string of pearls theory that we've been talking about for, it seems like decades now, is still very much in play. And new pearls are being added, you know, not daily, but with regularity. And so it does present a very pessimistic view of the Indo-Pacific moving forward into the future. If China continues to pursue the course that it's on, it will get stronger and stronger. And if America continues to flounder and not do well in its diplomatic efforts to provide the security that it has promised partners and allies, does not work towards better institutionalizing the Quad and other institutions in the region, then we collectively on the other side of the equation grow weaker and weaker. And that's not the position that we hope to be in if, in fact, push comes to shove as we move closer and closer to that 2049 date that China set for its own realization of the China dream. So I think I'll leave it there. And I know I'm a little bit under time, but I think that'll compensate for others who've gone over a little bit and give us some time for some question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, we cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself.
Sir, you are not audible. Professor Jaiprasad, sir, I would just request you to unmute yourself because we are not able to hear you.
Please go ahead. And now it is open to discussion. Please, our dear students are invited to ask questions. And for excellent presentations are over.
So, sir, how shall we go about it? Shall we take one by one questions, or shall we take all the questions in one go and then the
Yes, yes. Let the participant, they can participate and they can ask questions to the concerned, because we have there are 4 different questions from four perspectives. They have given different orientation, and so that the students can ask their own concern, or they can add their suggestions.
Professor Jaiprasad, sir, the students are allowed to give their questions only in the chat box or in the question answer session. The questions will be read by either the convener or the MC. Because students cannot directly interact, because we have not given them that rights to them, so they have given the questions on the chat box, sir. Dr. Divya, either you read out the questions for all the panelists, or the MC will do it.
Okay, good.
Thank you, sir.
MC, kindly take the questions, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Not visible to them, Dr. Divya, kindly read the questions.
Ma'am, am I audible and visible both? Because
Yes.
All right, fine, then I'll take questions. So the question is by Sangamitra to Professor Monish. Do you think AUKUS is going to overshadow the Quad Alliance? What are you expecting from the Quad Summit that is going to happen later tonight?
Dr. Divya, this question was for the previous session. If I'm not wrong, please read the current session question.
It's for this session only, but it has been, I wrongly, mistakenly said the wrong name. It's for Rasita Cancer.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, sir, I'll repeat the question. So, sir, do you think AUKUS is going to overshadow the Quad Alliance?
Yeah,
and
I was
what are the
expecting
expectations from the Quad Summit.
Okay. Yeah, this is really a very, very intriguing question, I must say. And I would rather also request Dr. Gunasekara sir to also supplement my answer. Everything, as I told, it's very much, in a very, very unfolding stage, whether it is Quad or whether it is AUKUS. These are all unfolding, very gradually. Nothing is coming up in concrete. Nothing is there in the pen and paper, or is there any resolution or a kind of even badge or institution to, discuss and concretize the objectives of these two forums. Yes, there are a lot more discussions and debate happening offline on now for the first time physically in Washington. On Quad, there are a lot more, literature available. But if you look at the objectives of Quad and the resolutions that have been passed or some of the activities that have been undertaken, the objective of Quad has been now expanded. Around 10, 15, core issues have been debated and cooperation ensured. So a lot of things are happening, but not specifically on military, except the Malabar exercise under the Quad. So the canvas of Quad has been expanded drastically over the years. And I don't really see a prospect of Quad becoming a military or NATO or SEATO type, what Dr. Gunasekara has pointed out. I don't see such kind of prospect for Quad anymore. Because I'm very, very negative, or maybe I'm very skeptic about India's role and India's meeting the expectation of America. I think somewhere the other India was brought in as an anchoring point that I highlighted in my presentation. But India probably knowingly did not took up that stage, that position, directly countering China expansion, which was actually behind the expectation or the format of Quad. So somewhere India is trying to make it a broad base, and which it has become. And I'm sure in the Quad negotiation, which is right now undergoing in Washington, D.C., all the areas, including vaccination, including maritime, maritime cooperation, including all other prospects, all other objectives will be debated. It's not only on military cooperation. I'm sure about it. Because the alternative, that idea now floated by America itself, is the AUKUS. So AUKUS probably would be Quad plus kind of organization where all the military type of or postures will be debated, discussed, and carried out. So AUKUS would be maybe the Western hand of or Western arm of Quad. Maybe Quad, if things go right, AUKUS I think will complement or supplement Quad as the military wing. If that is what I rather look forward, I can really predict that way. And probably Quad platform is going to be expanded. What I hinted also in my presentation, probably UK, United Kingdom, will somewhere or the other be accommodated within Quad. For long, there have been a debate whether Quad should be expanded or not. I think that's what we are going to see in near future. Quad will be expanded, but AUKUS will remain exclusive, and particularly probably if America is planning post-withdrawal from Afghanistan, that there will be some kind of military grouping vis-a-vis China. So I rather see, in a positive note, if I see AUKUS will be another wing or military wing of Quad. That's one way of looking at it. Maybe if negatively, if I look at, I think America is now transiting from Quad strategy to AUKUS strategy. Though America will concentrate on Quad on some other aspects, but particularly on military groupings and undertakings, AUKUS will be given more focus from military point of view and a kind of projection vis-a-vis China. So maybe this is a transition of American strategy in Indo-Pacific, what I see. So nothing is clear. As I told, I cannot conclude in black and white, but these are just assumptions that I'm making. I think I would request Dr. Gunasekaran sir to please throw light on this.
Happy to pipe in here, Sitakat. Thank you. I concur that that there's some misconnection between the expectations that the United States had for India in the Quad, but I would counter that there's also missed expectations that India had for the United States. Our relationship's been very complex ever since Indian independence, again going back to the weapon systems that India has, 90% Soviet and Russian made. Why? It's not because that's what India's first choice was. It's because we wouldn't give India the opportunity to build U.S. weapon systems indigenously. The Soviets and the Russians had no qualms about that. It's a lucrative thing, and they were looking to proliferate their weapon systems anyway. And so that's the route that India had to go, because they didn't have any other viable option. And unfortunately, we continue down that path, right? India has proven itself to be our friend, in the post-Cold War era, and yet we conclude AUKUS without, including India in that equation. And so, I think, AUKUS could conceivably be rolled into the Quad, or it could represent the idea that we've given up on Quad and that we're going in a different direction. Australia has, borders both oceans, Pacific and Indian. And so it can serve as that pivot point, if you will, between the two oceans. And so maybe that's the equation that we're going with. As to whether AUKUS has overshadowed the Quad meeting, I'd say here in the States, it certainly has. If you look at the media, there's a lot of talk about AUKUS. There's very little, if any, about the Quad, despite the fact that the heads of state are here. You haven't had the big fanfare with Prime Minister Modi's arrival that you had when he came during the Trump administration, where we had the huge rally in Houston with the expatriate community. Much more subdued one here in Washington D.C. and a lot less fanfare with the whole thing. And I think if you want to emphasize a meeting of this nature, you kind of go all out in your presentation of it, right? And we haven't had that here to the extent that one would have expected if we were going to put that emphasis on the Quad. So I do think AUKUS is overshadowing it for now. If anything definitive and firm comes out of the Quad meetings, that could change. But given the current state of American diplomacy, I'm not going to hold my breath on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, the next question has been posted, not in the chat box, but I have just received the text.
Sorry to interrupt. There is some background news coming. I don't know, background noise coming. Some
IT person can please mute if any of these participant has unmuted by mistake. I think now it's fine, sir.
Yes.
So, all right. So I have received one question from my fellow colleague, Dr. Shrish Kumar Pathak. How do you see Indo-Pacific region in future? A war zone of world powers or a peaceful prospective region?
Just may I come in for a minute?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sorry, actually, I'm kind of taking it as a conversation among the panelists also, kind of a panel. You see, and it is, sorry, I'm also kind of, coming between Dr. Shirish's question, but I'll be very brief, and particularly I cannot resist intruding in because the conversation was about Quad vis-a-vis, AUKUS, etc., etc. Something which I was going to talk about, I missed it, is about this kind of, and that is where I was also sounding a bit pessimist or skeptical is a soft word, is about something which has been happening in last week or so in this entire, thing. And that was France, Australia, and United States. United States, France, Australia had a submarine deal sometime back, which last week Australia cancelled at the last moment. The French Foreign Ministry says that they got hardly 6 hours notice before this submarine deal was cancelled. And it was assigned to United States. France has, very aggressive tweets on that. They feel humiliated. The foreign minister says, Ladrin said that it's a stab in the back, And then, rather than the usual diplomatic resolution of these things, Macron didn't call Biden, didn't call Australian Prime Minister, but he called Modi. And Modi tweeted on 21st September that I had a good conversation with Macron, my dear friend Macron, and we had very productive conversation on collaboration, closer collaboration between India and France in the Indo-Pacific. So when, things like this are happening right now, and as we are saying that tonight there will be a Quad thing. So, and all these, Quad, AUKUS, everyone is talking about, a peaceful, free and open Indo-Pacific, etc., etc. And Macron went on to the extent withdrawing his diplomats, ambassadors from US and Australia both. This is not a small thing. So where do we see, the kind of optimism, and both the panelists, while they were talking about Quad and AUKUS, none of them mentioned about something which is happening right now, which has, completely overshadowed, has the potential of re-articulating the entire configuration, because withdrawing ambassador from US and Australia by France is not a small deal. And also, coming to India is not something which is a small deal, because after all, India is part of Quad, but here India is not part of AUKUS. So can we see something really, that kind of a positive note which we have been seeing, or at the moment, like I'm seeing a terrible reconfiguration, something which may lead to what Dr. Shiris is asking about. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Manoj.
Okay, sir, if I have the permission to answer this question, two sets of questions.
We have got it.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think still there is some background noise. Okay, now it is silent. All right, so these are two wonderful discourses or debates now unfolding here. One is Dr. Sri's asking the question about whether Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific is going to become a peaceful zone or a war zone. And now we all from international relations, and I teach specially geopolitics or political geography as well to my students. And if you, Sris, if you look back the evolution of geopolitics itself as a subject, always one part of the world at one given point take the center stage of global politics. You go to Mackinder, which was talking about the heartland, then coming to the rimland, then coming to throughout the Cold War, you have seen Europe becoming the center stage of global politics. Then post Cold War, you find again Asia or part of Asia, Eurasia, what is called. So always in the world at a given point of time, certain geographic locations acquire a bit of prominence because of certain reasons. Right? Whether it is British withdrawal and then the heartland, what the British scholar pointed out, heartland. Then he predicted, in fact, anybody who is going to control the heartland will become the future global power. And in fact, Hitler jumped in, but he failed. And finally, you found emergence of Soviet Union from that particular part. So always, geopolitics teaches us that in a given point of time, a given particular geographic location acquire a bit of prominence, and a lot of things unfold from there on. Post Cold War, you have seen Asia, largely Asia becoming hotspot of the world. You have seen India, Pakistan, China becoming the center stage of global politics. Of course, America as a superpower, globally present, so it is always in the hotspot. So America is a global power, so it is present in every corner of the world. So America, beside that, other regions also acquired a bit of prominence in different stages. And for quite a number of decades, we have seen immediate post-Cold War phase, Asia, a part of Africa becoming in the center stage of the global politics. Now, things are a little bit changing, moving towards the East or what is called Asia-Pacific and now Indo-Pacific. Now, this particular geographic location acquiring prominence, and I think the first panelist and the second one elaborated why Asia-Pacific is so important, population, demography, resources, whatever you talk about, everything is there. So for a number of almost a decade or so, Indo-Pacific has become the center stage of global politics. And this is what the lesson that we get from geopolitics or political geography studies. So yes, after a point you find, again, the global discourse will shift to another location, maybe after a few developments in different parts of the world. So this has been always. Now, specifically to the question, whether it's a peaceful zone, or it will become a war zone. I think in international politics, we love both peace and war. Both should go simultaneously. Without a war, you can't have a peace. And without peace, you can't end the war. So anyway, that's a realistic assessment, but that's I'm not giving a negative connotation to it. War and peace and part and parcel of this, which angle you are looking at, whether it is a war zone because of China's activities, whether America-China competition, whether it is India is a kind of balancing factor, whether it is a peace prevailing right now, whatever way it is a tensed peace or a cold war or a hot war, whatever it is, it's I think a intellectual discourse that we can agree or disagree. So I don't have any specific answer. But yes, for the last couple of decades, Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific has acquired center stage of global politics, and it will continue for next few decades, what I presume. The second question, Dr. Amit actually pointed out rightly. If you, sir, marked my presentation, and even Dr. Gunasekharan also amplified that aspect, what we told AUKUS is a part of that annoyance with France. AUKUS is all about that. France supposed to have that deal, but America now having that deal and to supply to the nuclear submarine to Australia. So it's actually hijacking of that process, yes. And now, instead of talking to America, France has sold its anguishness, withdrew its ambassadors, and calling up Modi, largely because in Indo-Pacific, in the Quad discourse, India is the anchor point so far been. Now, something is happening beyond India in the Quad platform, of course, is a surprise for everyone, for India, for France, definitely. So talking of France, Prime Minister to Narendra Modi, obviously, because so far India was at the anchor point. Now, what I mean, Dr. Gunasekhan might amplify that. What I see now, Australia is becoming the center stage. Probably America went that way, and therefore other countries like UK and France, they are also struggling to find a place in the Indo-Pacific theater. So there is a competition within what I see. India is already there, Japan is already there, Australia is already there, but there are two other countries like France and Germany, even for that matter. They want their pie also within the Indo-Pacific theater. So there is an internal strife, I won't say it, internal competition. Now, who are the major players? Or if the world is going to be divided on the basis of America and Indo-Pacific democratic powers vis-a-vis China, then who is going to acquire the center stage? Who is going to woo America much better than anybody else? I think that's what it is going to unfold. I will stop here. I think Dr. Gunasekhan can add.
Yeah, if I could weigh in on this too, in terms of the issue with France, I think a lot of this was diplomatic grandstanding. The ambassador to the U.S. is already on his way back, so it was mostly Macron throwing a tizzy fit. And keep in mind, the French got their contract for the submarines by stealing the contract away from Japan. Australia had a contract with Japan for submarines that the French undercut and got the contract. So I guess instant card diplomatic tizzy fit. I think it's rather clear that this isn't going to derail things with the rest of Europe. Germany did not support them, nor did anybody else of any size and influence. But as to whether or not this is going to, whether the Indo-Pacific is going to be a war zone or a zone of peace, that, as Sitakan mentions, it remains to be seen. And the likelihood is it'll be a mix of the two, low intensity conflict here and there, hopefully never escalating to a full on war. But that all depends on what happens with Taiwan, right? I mean, if America stands back and lets Taiwan fall to China, then all of our credibility as a security guarantor is out the door. And it's already damaged based on what we've done with Afghanistan this year. So we really can't afford any further dents to our credibility in the region as a security guarantor, as a great power. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, sir. There's one more question.
Dr. Divya, I think, excuse me, Dr. Divya, I think we are already exceeding the time. Yes. All resource persons are already awaiting to join for the valedictory session. I think we can have the questions shooted up to the dignitaries, and then we can get the answer. I'm so sorry for intervening here. Dr. Divya. So I'm really sorry for the same. I know students have got many questions, and I'm curbing here just because of the constraints of the time. Dr. Divya.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So I would like to extend my gratitude to the chair, Professor K. Jayaprasad, for chairing the session, and the other eminent panelists, Dr. Amit Kumar Mishra sir, Mr. Ranganathan sir, Dr. Sitakan sir, and Dr. Ernest sir. So it was really an enriching session where we learned about the recent developments related to Asia Pacific versus Indo-Pacific. So again, a revisiting of the concept of the Indo-Pacific. So Quad and AUKUS, different developments. So I'm sure all the students, research scholars, the participants, they have benefited from the valuable insights which we have received from our eminent panelists. And thank you so very much. Over to MC for the
Thank
formal
you.
advice.
Thank you all.
Thank you to the chair and all the panelists for an enlightening session and for taking out the time out of your busy schedules. And we have definitely learned a lot, especially the students of Amity Institute of International Studies, and for a greater understanding on Asia Pacific in prospective contest. So once again, thank you very much. And we'll now move forward to the valedictory session of the e-conference, and I hand it over to Paki. Thank you so much.